الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر.
الله أكبر.
You know what made Hitler and National Socialism rising up in Germany? It was the huge economic social corruption made by the so-called Jews in Weimar Germany, who were in control of every aspect of the society there, through their power and money, by owning the most important newspapers, factories, theaters, etc. When Hitler and National Socialism, or it's better to say, the National Socialist Labour Party came to power, they were in direct opposition to international communism, which they were at war with them from the very first. So they tried to prioritize the private initiative to show that eradicating the private ownership is not the answer for the problems of humanity. They tried to show the root of the problems not in the issue of ownership, but instead in the issue of distribution and money as a means for distribution of goods. So they tried to initiate a new version of money of their own, controlling by no one but the state. Well, one of the fundamental differences between fascism and communism were of course the stance of fascism on the issue of money. Otherwise, both of them had many similarities, like being revolutionary, concentrating on populism and mobilization of masses, and of course the welfare of the working class. Did you ever know that Hitler's political party was in fact a party for workers and the working class? The amazing thing is that after World War II and fall of Hitler's National Socialism, the same so-called Jews who controlled the German Weimar and Hitler rose up against them, had become the sole clique running the world from the east to the west. Amazing, isn't it? As you know, the United Nations, initiated by the Allies to fight Hitler and fascism during World War II, became an international organization running the planet. Then other organizations connected to the UN showed themselves up, like World Bank and IMF, in the name of developing the poor, underdeveloped countries economically, socially and politically. For such agenda, they initiated development programs, or the so-called structural adjustment programs, proposing to the developing nations around the world simultaneously, with luxury loans to make them accept such proposals. The main parameters of the programs, which are still in place right now, are privatization, deconcentration and expanding sport. And the crazy thing they proposed for expanding export was the policy of devaluating national currencies. Can you believe it? Countries devaluating their own currencies to make their products cheap so they get sold easily. Crazy, isn't it? Let's see what was behind such agenda, bros and sis. Right after the end of World War II, so-called Jews, which were in fact shamans, or the so-called Freemasons, who are guided by magic and extraterrestrials learned from the experience of Hitler's National Socialism, went to control the world through controlling money. It's like a movie, isn't it? So they held a conference called Bretton Woods and made dollar as the sole currency of the world. Or in simple terms, every country who wanna have a transaction with another one has to use dollar for the transaction. You know how crazy such agenda is? In this way, dollar got so much value because of the huge demand for it. It's due to the rule of supply and demand, brothers and sis. But still, there is a huge agenda remaining behind it. Imagine, in this process, the US and the so-called Jews behind the dollar gained free goods and resources for each of the transactions that has been done in this world since then, simply because they got something in return when they issue each dollar in each transaction. How crazy is that? They are robbing the world for years. That's the new colonialism no one speaks of, really. In fact, for every policy they propose in the so-called development programs, there is agenda behind it. After privatization and selling out public resources to rich capitalists cheaply, a small clique owning much of the country shows its face up everywhere, creating a huge social economic gap in societies. If we don't speak of the huge facade happening everywhere, such policies have got implemented because of the cheap illegal sellout of public resources to the ones connected to the statement. The deconcentration which would lead to chaos happening in states and creating disorder everywhere. Such policies implemented. And of course, the export-oriented policy which would make countries dependent to each other and eradicate the very basics of independency in nations, which of course later leads to being dependent politically to the rich nations and the rich clique behind them. For example, like today, seeing the huge oppression around themselves with their own eyes, but saying no word, because it is not in the interest of such clique. Well, it was the agenda of the world order after World War II, which was a world order dominated by the West up until now.